I would like to invite our next speaker, which is his name Arun. So he's from FaithTech Malaysia Director, and he will come to share about his own testimony and about his journey of discovering tech in faith. Please help me welcome Arun.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Just gonna share my screen. Okay. All right. So, good afternoon if you are in the afternoon time zone right now. My name is Arun Kumar. I am a product manager at Muda.my, just part of the Carousel Group. I'm also the founder of Waymaker.works, and I'm also the city director for FaithTech KL, which we just launched a few weeks ago. So thank you to the committee of FaithTech Asia for organizing such a really wonderful summit. I think this is it's due time. It's amazing that we're finally getting something like this up now. I'm just going to share a story of mine, a story of discovering tech in faith, and it starts about 8 years ago in a place called Wandoo B. Wandoo B, I guess you might be wondering what is Wandoo B. Wandoo B is actually an oil rig platform. It was off the coast of Western Australia, on the Indian Ocean. And so back then, I was an engineer. I was an oil and gas engineer. I was based in the US for a while. I was sent to Australia for a while. And life was good, right? So life was good, but it felt very meaningless. I don't know if you can relate to this, that sometimes you feel everything is going well materialistically, but then in terms of a sense of direction or a sense of purpose in life, it kind of feels like it's not going anywhere. And it went on for some time, despite of all the nice facilities around me and the good job and everything. But one day when I was on Wandoo B, the platform, it was a very early morning, and I was outside and looking at the sunrise at the horizon. And I just paused and reflected on my life, and the Indian Ocean waves, humongous waves, and just crashing against the platform, and behind it was the sun rising. And I just had this one question in my heart: what is my purpose? And I was asking God, why am I here, God? Why am I here? What am I doing with my life? I have everything, but I don't find a sense of direction. I don't have a sense of purpose. And I think that was the beginning of purpose for me, because I got back to my home in where I was living in Australia, and I started going to a church. I started getting active. I started serving. I started feeling the passion to serve. And I realized, I think I'm being called into the full-time ministry. And a few months after that, I got hit by redundancy. So I had to come back to Malaysia. When I came back to Malaysia, I didn't go for any engineering jobs. I just waited upon the Lord, and I just served in whatever capacity I could. And finally, I ended up in my local church as a youth worker. Eventually became a youth pastor. And the funny thing is that at that time, a lot of people said that Arun had failed, right? So the rumors that I was getting was that Arun had failed as an engineer, and that's why he came to work in the church. As sad as it sounds, as disappointing as it sounds, there were people who think like that, right, regarding church work. And so I took it with a pinch of salt. I took it as a challenge, and I just continued serving. And 4 years into the full-time church work, I realized that I have failed. I had failed, because when I got into the church as a worker, I thought that I could bring my skills as an engineer to contribute towards the ministry. So I thought I could bridge technology, engineering, and the ministry. But what happened was I felt stuck instead. Because I had a lot of these skills and analytical thinking and critical thinking as an engineer, I was always looking at, I always spot gaps and things that could be improved and optimized. But I felt like those set of skills had no place in the church. It was not needed. And I just felt not useful enough. So 4 years later, I really felt like I needed to do something about it. I prayed about it, and I took a whole year to seek God and ask for some direction. And I really felt God strongly speaking to me about going into the marketplace ministry. So 4 years of church work, and I took the decision to leave, to go into the marketplace. And this time, the joke was that everybody said Arun had backslided. So I don't know if it's the same term used wherever you are, but they say, oh, he fell from grace or something like that, right? So Arun has backslided from the faith, and that's why he left the church and he's going back to work out there. It was difficult. I had to deal with those kind of perception on me, and I also had these questions in me, like, God, why did you get me into engineering? Get me to work somewhere overseas, give me all this exposure and all these experiences and knowledge, and then get me back to home, and then got me into the full-time ministry. And just when I thought that was going to be my life going forward, you take me out. I thought once you go full-time, you are in full-time. And I was troubled within regarding that whole situation. But I think what God did was reveal to me something that I never saw it before, that full-time is not about the employment, it is about time. So it's not about taking a salary from the church or carrying a title or a position called a pastor, but it was about how much time of my life was I actually serving God. And that was how full-time was defined. And that gave me a breakthrough and clarity and closure for me to move on. But what happened was, when I got back out there into the marketplace, I realized that I was so far behind in terms of engineering. I was so far away from the industry that the industry had moved on, and I couldn't get back into my previous role. So all the doors were closed. Literally, no jobs available. All recruiters told me that, hey, you know what, you got to start from beginning again, which wasn't going to work for me because I was married and I had a kid. All doors were closed except for one. A professor of mine called me up and said, hey, Arun, there's a scholarship to do a postgrad in artificial intelligence. Do it. I was like, okay, all doors were closed. Looks like this was the only way forward. So I got into it. And then I realized that there was this thing called Industry 4.0 out there in the world that was just beginning. And it was crazy because I had no idea that this much had changed. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, IoT, blockchain, and a lot of things were happening. And I was amazed at what was going on. And this new door that I got into, this whole world of the fourth industrial revolution and all these latest technologies, also began a different journey for me. So I co-founded a startup with a postgraduate mate, and we were going to do artificial intelligence as a service. And back then in Malaysia, AI was still a little premature. So it was very difficult to start it up. But we were the top 20 startups in the world for a program in Dubai. And we were the only Malaysian representation. So when I got to Dubai, it was a failed venture. A year later, we didn't get through. But when I went to Dubai, after having seen what was happening in the realm of technology and engineering today, when I got to Dubai and I saw what other companies and others are doing around the world in terms of technology, I just couldn't help but think, why wasn't the church embracing the latest technologies? I mean, companies and businesses that were not in the business of reaching out to people were embracing technologies to reach out to the people. And the church was in the business of reaching out to the people, but it wasn't. It was very difficult for me to chew this because we moved, we were fine. We were at the front line of a lot of things in history. And up till about 100 years ago, we kind of started slowing down. The church used to build schools, literal school. I came from a Methodist school, a missionary school. The church built hospitals and infrastructure in the mission field. And today schools have been downsized to Sunday school. And hospitals have become weekend clinics in most churches. Why have things like this scaled down? Why have we gotten into a sustainable mindset to just keep living with what we have? Why aren't we trying to think of scaling it further as we used to before? So these were questions that were challenging me within. It was very difficult for me because if I walk to a church today, at least in my country or at least in my hometown, if I walk to a church and I pick up a form that says sign up as a volunteer, and I look at the list of things that I could choose to sign up to volunteer in, I would see music, arts, singing, vocals, and PA system, and maybe the lights. That's the most technology that you would see. I wouldn't see system architecture or DevOps or software developer or electrical engineering. I wouldn't see things like this listed. But the question is why? Why have these set of skills and talents been sort of omitted out of ministry lately? And it was very difficult for me because these are people, engineers and technology, people from technology background. We're all builders. We're all builders, and builders are servants of God too. If you go back in history, if you go back to the Old Testament, builders built the temple, the walls, the ark, infrastructure. It was builders. The need still exists today, just a different infrastructure. We need to move the infrastructure to the latest infrastructure. There is the need to still build, but it's not happening. So I started on this quest to reach out to Christians who go to church every Sunday morning feeling that they have nothing to offer because their skills were in tech or engineering. And I wanted to engage them and reach out to them and say, hey, you know what, let's work together and let's build solutions to scale ministry forward, to expand. You know, the scripture says that Jesus said, on this rock, I'll build my church and the gates of Hades shall not overcome it. And I remember going to Bible school back then, and the lecturer challenged us in terms of how we perceive that scripture. And I think subconsciously, we tend to look at it and say, all right, Jesus will make sure that the church will never die. The gates of Hades will not overcome the church. We will always survive. It was a very survival defensive mindset. But the lecturer challenged us to think of it from a different perspective, where the church was meant to grow, and it will grow and grow and grow so strong, so big, that the gates of Hades will not be able to stop the growing church. We were meant to be an offensive movement, offensive in love and grace, offensive in reaching out, offensive in compassion. It is a great commandment. And to do that, we needed the latest infrastructure to scale those efforts. But we're not doing. And 2 years of searching for something like this, a community like this, went south. I couldn't find anyone. A friend or two, that was all. But during these 2 years, I had a crucible moment. I recalled something that happened years ago when I was in the full-time ministry. And it was during a time when I was reaching out to a school in my hometown where the students were from very difficult backgrounds, very challenged backgrounds, financially challenged, culturally challenged. And one of the teachers called me up one day and said, Pastor Arun, one of the boys here, Aaron, he plays very good badminton. He wants to participate in a tournament, but he doesn't have proper sports attire. Would you mind helping to find us some clothes for him? So, you know, your heart kind of sinks like, no clothes, right? So I called up the NGO arm of our church and I said, hey, can I get some clothes for some children? So yeah, come over. So I went to the NGO. They took me upstairs. They opened the door to that whole big room of clothes. And there were bags and bags and bags and bags and bags of clothes. Good quality clothes. And I took the clothes and I distributed the clothes to the children. And it didn't hit me then. Only years later, when I recalled that moment, it became Crucible. Because what I realized was that perhaps we tend to perceive social works or charity as the problem in it being the lack of supply to meet demands. That people had needs, but we didn't have enough supply to meet the needs. You know, sometimes the church pastor would say it from the pulpit, okay, we're going to raise some funds or some food for some families who need it. And the next day you go and there'll be an oversupply of rice or the oversupply of flour, but a very little supply of certain other things. And then I realized that the challenge with social works was not the lack of supply, but the lack of a supply chain. Because social works was a system that predominantly ran on volunteers, which meant minimal resources, limited manpower. So they had clothes, enough of clothes, so much of clothes, but they didn't have enough people to distribute the clothes to the people who needed it. They didn't have information on who needed what. And this was a problem that could have been easily solved with technology with a tech infrastructure, which is precisely what I went off to start working on. When COVID had this hit us this year, my friend and I got together and we shared about some ideas and we built Waymaker. And Waymaker was going to be this platform that decentralizes the process of helping one another through peer-to-peer helping, where people with need can connect directly with people who can meet needs, removing walls, removing boundaries. We just went live a few months ago and it's been going great. But what was interesting is that when I started Waymaker and we started getting into challenges and problems in terms of, okay, what's next? Suddenly, the 2 years search for a community of Christians in tech, I got connected to a lot of communities within 1 week. And that's very interesting to me. I was searching for them for 2 years. I couldn't find them. But after I started Waymaker and I had an issue, within 1 week, I got connected to FaithTech, Christians in Tech, Kingdom Builders, Indigitus, Christians in Product, and so many other communities on Slack. It was amazing. It reminds me of the scripture in the book of Joshua, when God gave Joshua instructions to cross the Jordan. And the scripture says, and as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. It's interesting here to note that, at least the revelation that I had was that the instruction was clear. Take the step, the water stops. It wasn't to wait for the waters to stop flowing before taking the step to cross, but to step out by faith and to see what God does. It was amazing because even me, and I think a lot of us, we tend to want to wait for the water to stop before taking the step of faith. But God is saying, take the step and see what happens. And that's what happened. When I waited for a community, I waited for something to happen so that I can start working on platforms like Waymaker, nothing happened. But when I started working on platforms like Waymaker, everything happened. And I think I just want to encourage you today, if you can resonate with my story, if you can relate to my story, if you are finding yourself in a very similar situation, I want to encourage you to take the step of faith, to challenge yourself to take that step of faith and see that when your feet touches the water, it stops flowing and you can cross. I know that some of the challenges that we have is about not knowing what is going to happen. But I believe that the fear of the unknown is the beginning of faith. And it's an exciting place to be in. And sometimes we are waiting for a door to open. Well, sometimes God opens the door for you. But sometimes it's not open, but it's not locked. And sometimes he just gives you the keys to unlock it. I really want to encourage you to get yourself in a community, a like-minded community, wherever you are. If there is a FaithTech chapter, get involved. If there isn't one, talk to FaithTech, talk to us, and start one, like how we did for KL. Until this point, we had no FaithTech KL, but in the last few weeks, we have a very small community of people from all different backgrounds, pastors and engineers and designers, coming together, talking about how technology can come in to solve problems that stop the church from going forward. And lastly, if you're interested to know more about FaithTech Kuala Lumpur or Waymaker, please do get in touch. These are my details. If you are in Kuala Lumpur, if you are based in Malaysia, do get in touch. We'll be really excited, really happy to have you join us. Thank you very much.